When did your mother-in-law's pregnancy make you question reality? I am literally vibrating with panic right now, and I need to type this out before I delete everything and pretend this entire Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. never happened. You guys, I just found out my mother-in-law is claiming she is pregnant, and not just pregnant but pregnant with my child's sibling, and we don't even have kids yet. I know, it sounds absolutely insane. I'm currently sitting in the lobby of the Women's Health Clinic on the 5th floor of the Sterling Building, pretending to scroll TikTok, but actually just typing this frantic Reddit post into my notes app because if I don't vent, my head is going to explode. My name is Nathan King 29M, and I am by nature an anxious overthinker. Past me was an absolute clown for not seeing this train wreck coming, honestly. I have been dating my boyfriend Kenneth Jenkins, 22M, for 2 years and 8 months. Yes, there's a 7-year age gap. Yes, I know, the first big red flag. But he was so charming and sweet, and he promised me the world. He was still in school when we met, working part-time trying to get his life together. Now he works in entrepreneurship, which really means he's a pyramid scheme pusher. We'll get to Kenneth later, because right now the primary source of my impending nervous breakdown is his mother, Alice Bailey, 69F. Alice is the definition of a guilt trip parent. Everything she does is laced with suffering and passive aggression. If she buys you a $43.67 grocery bill, she will remind you daily for 6 months about the sacrifice she made for that organic oat milk. When we moved into our apartment 3B last year, she insisted on giving us a set of slightly mismatched IKEA plates, and every time she visits, she checks to make sure we are only using her plates and not the ones I bought at Target. It's exhausting. Her ex-husband, Kenneth's dad, is Philip Jones, 68M. Philip is the parent who compares. He's the guy who always mentions how much better his other son, Brandon, is doing. Brandon, who is a real estate agent and drives the BMW that Philip secretly wishes Kenneth could afford. Philip is mostly quiet, but when he speaks, it's usually to ask Kenneth if he's made any actual money from his crypto lifestyle coaching scheme yet, or to tell me I should really be using my PTO hours more efficiently to volunteer at a soup kitchen instead of watching Netflix and Hulu on my days off. So let's set the scene for how I ended up here, gripping my iPhone 14 so hard I'm worried about the screen cracking even more than it already is. Kenneth and I had a huge fight 2 days ago. It was Tuesday and I was trying to pay the monthly $1,247 rent, which is in both our names. I went to transfer my portion and realized Kenneth's half wasn't in the shared checking account. I checked the Zelle history and saw 3 suspicious $200 withdrawals over the weekend, all labeled business expenses. I texted him immediately. Me 11:15 a.m. Where's the rent money? Why were there those $200 withdrawals? Kenneth 11:17 a.m. Chill out babe. I used it for a networking event. It's going to come back 10x. Trust the process. Me 11:20 a.m. I cannot trust the process when the rent is late. That's $600 gone in 3 days. We agreed to stop using the rent money for your pyramid scheme stuff. Kenneth 11:21 a.m. Overreacting. I am serious. It was essential for closing a deal with a high-value prospect. I'll get it by Friday. Me 11:25 a.m. The late fee is going to be $100. I am not paying your late fee because you needed to buy 3 expensive coffees and maybe some terrible suit for a fake meeting. Kenneth 11:28 a.m. You really think I'd jeopardize our 12-month lease over coffee? You know I love you after all I've done for you. Why are you always so negative? The gaslighting was intense. I was so angry, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest that tells me I'm heading toward a panic attack. I spent an hour trying to work. I had 8 back-to-back Zoom meetings that day, and my Slack notifications were at 247, seriously. I ended up having to use my emergency savings to cover his portion of the rent, plus the $85 plumber charge we incurred last week for the garbage disposal he broke. I was so mad I couldn't even eat the leftover Chipotle I had in the fridge. I was done, just done. Later that evening around 5:30 p.m. the Ring doorbell went off. It was Alice 69F and Philip 68F. Usually they text. This was weird. They came in and sat on the IKEA couch, which Alice immediately critiqued as lacking adequate lumbar support. Kenneth looked terrified. He was wearing the same slightly stained t-shirt he wore when he woke up, fiddling with his Samsung Galaxy. Alice looked different. She was wearing a brightly colored, flowing kaftan and a pair of sunglasses indoors. She was also clutching a Panera bag like it contained the Declaration of Independence. Nathan, dear, Alice started, her voice heavy with martyrdom. I see you're looking a little stressed. Are you getting enough sleep? I'm fine, Alice, I said, forcing a smile. Just a long day. Philip cleared his throat. Kenneth was just telling us about his latest venture. Sounds very promising. Though I must say, Brandon's latest closing commission was nearly $20,000. He's looking at buying a Peloton next month. I felt my eyes start to twitch. Mom, Dad, can we talk about this later? Kenneth interrupted, clearly sweating. Alice ignored him completely. She placed the Panera bag gently on the coffee table. Nathan, darling, this is a very difficult thing to tell you, Alice said, reaching across and taking my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, but I wanted you to hear it from me before the news gets around. I braced myself for the usual guilt trip, maybe about how I hadn't returned her Tupperware yet or how the garden looked sad. I went to my doctor this morning, she continued, leaning in conspiratorially. And well, it seems I am pregnant. My brain stopped working. I looked at Kenneth, who just stared at the floor. I looked at Philip, who was avoiding eye contact and adjusting the fit of his Apple Watch. I looked back at Alice, who was 69 years old. Wait, what? I stammered. Alice, are you feeling okay? Maybe the doctor said menopausal or gastrointestinal issues. Alice gave me a look of pity and deep suffering. Oh, Nathan, my dear anxious boy, I know this is a shock, but yes, I am expecting. But how? I mean, with all due respect, you're 69. Age is just a number when the Lord decides to bless you, she intoned, touching her non-existent bump dramatically. And the doctor was quite clear, I'm 3 months along. I started shaking. I know this sounds ridiculous, but the absurdity of it was making me physically dizzy. Philip finally spoke in a low, monotone voice. It's been difficult for us to process this sudden change, Nathan, but we've accepted it as fate. So Kenneth, I managed, staring at my boyfriend who was literally trying to become one with the wall. Your mother is expecting a baby. Kenneth just mumbled, yeah, it's wild. Right, so Alice, congratulations, I guess, I said, trying to process this medically impossible claim. But what does this have to do with me or Kenneth or us? Alice sighed, clearly disappointed that I hadn't immediately burst into tears of joy and offered to knit tiny baby booties. Well, Nathan, it changes everything, she said. You know how much Philip and I have wanted grandchildren. Kenneth and you have been together for almost 3 years now and you haven't given us any concrete timeline. We've been patient. We're 29 and 22, Alice. We have a 12-month lease and Kenneth is selling essential oils to strangers on Instagram. I snapped, the filter completely gone. We are not ready for children. And that's precisely why this is happening, Alice declared, taking a deep breath that sounded more like a death rattle. God knows we need an heir, and since you two are dragging your feet, I am going to have the sibling Kenneth will never provide. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was pure, unadulterated Alice logic. But here is where the problem lies, Alice continued, dropping the bombshell that made me question my entire reality. Because of my advanced age, my pregnancy is considered extremely high risk. The doctors are insisting I get monthly, highly detailed, very expensive ultrasounds and genetic testing, and I need a primary care physician to monitor me weekly. I nodded slowly, waiting for the inevitable ask for money. And unfortunately, she said, looking straight at Kenneth with a pointed glare that said this is what happens when you don't hit your monthly sales quota in your fake company, the insurance Philip and I currently have is, well, it's not adequate. The deductible is astronomically high and the prior authorization for the level of care I need was just denied. I am so sorry to hear that, Alice, I said, already forming a boundary. But Kenneth and I are barely affording our $1,247 rent and the late fee he just incurred. We cannot financially help with medical bills right now. Oh, Nathan, Alice said, shaking her head. You misunderstand. I'm not asking for money. She paused for dramatic effect. The silence stretched so thin I could hear the neighbor's dog barking in apartment 2C. I'm asking for access to your insurance plan, dear. You work for that large tech company, don't you? With the gold-plated benefits package, I started laughing, a short, sharp burst of hysterical laughter that sounded painful even to my own ears. You want me to commit insurance fraud, I asked, to put your medically impossible pregnancy on my corporate insurance, Alice, I could lose my job. Oh, nonsense, she waved her hand dismissively. You just add me as a dependent. We are family, aren't we? And think of the opportunity. You can come with me to my appointments. It will be such bonding time, and besides, I need you to be there for the ultrasounds. I need your support. Kenneth is too busy with his important business deals. Philip finally lifted his gaze and looked at me, an expression of grim determination on his face. Nathan, this is really important for the future of the Jones family line. It's the least you can do after all the dinners Alice has made you. And yes, she literally calculates the price of every meal she makes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them Alice was clearly suffering from a psychological break, that she needed a mental health specialist, not an OB-GYN, and that Kenneth needed to get an actual job. Instead, I looked at Kenneth. Did you know about this? He finally lifted his head. Well, she mentioned she was seeing a specialist about some things. I didn't know the claim was this. Liar. Past me was such an idiot, he had to have known. Alice doesn't make a 5-cent move without consulting Kenneth first, especially if it involves my corporate benefits. The confrontation ended with me telling them in no uncertain terms that I would absolutely not be committing federal insurance fraud and that Alice needed to see a therapist, not a midwife. Alice started the full-blown guilt trip protocol. She started crying dramatically, claiming I was robbing her last chance at happiness, and that her heart was too weak to handle this stress. Philip just stood up and said, I knew Brandon was the reliable one. They left. Kenneth tried to apologize, mumbled something about how it's complicated, and then had the audacity to ask me for $347 to cover a marketing subscription he desperately needed for his scheme. I told him I needed space. I told him to go stay with his friend Derek for the night. I felt physically sick. I stress-ate half a pint of Talenti gelato and spent 4 hours Googling, can a 69-year-old woman be pregnant? Spoiler alert, no, not unless significant medical intervention occurred, which Alice could not afford, which brings us back to the insurance thing. The next morning, Wednesday, I woke up feeling simultaneously numb and raging. I couldn't focus at work. I had to postpone a meeting with my boss because I was ugly crying in the bathroom. Then around 3:00 p.m. I got a text from Alice. Alice, 3:02 p.m. Nathan, I'm very disappointed. Your selfishness is hurting the baby. Kenneth told me how stressed you are. Alice, 3:02 p.m. But I understand. I realize committing to the pregnancy might be overwhelming. Alice, 3:03 p.m. So I went ahead and handled it. I immediately felt my stomach drop again. Handled what? Did she sign me up for a dependent on my company portal? Did she steal my social security number? My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. Me, 3:05 p.m. Alice, what did you handle? Alice, 3:06 p.m. I booked the appointment, the first one. I need to establish care and my doctor recommended the best facility in the city. The one on 5th floor of the Sterling building. They take your company's insurance. Me, 3:07 p.m. Alice, I told you I am not adding you to my plan. Alice, 3:08 p.m. Oh, I know, dear, I didn't add myself to your plan. Alice, 3:08 p.m. I added you to mine. I stared at the screen confused. She had no plan. Her deductible was too high. Alice, 3:09 p.m. It was a simple administrative change. I just told the office that you are my son and that you are going to be attending the appointment with me to better understand the process. They assumed you were the father, which I found hilarious. LOL. Me 3:11 p.m. What is happening? Who is the father? Alice. Alice 3:12 p.m. Oh Nathan, that's a silly question. The father is Philip, of course. The cognitive dissonance was reaching critical levels. Philip, the parent who compares, and Alice, the guilt-trip parent, were apparently actively engaging in a medically impossible pregnancy, and they were now trying to rope me into it. Alice 3:15 p.m. I told them you were my son and that you needed a full physical and blood panel because you are under extreme stress and are having fertility issues. They booked you in immediately. You need to come with me. Me 3:17 p.m. I am not coming. I have a job. Alice 3:17 p.m. But dear, you need to be there for me. You need to support the family. And besides, I told them you were going to pay the remaining $85 copay that I cannot afford today. If you don't show up, they might cancel my appointment, and I will lose the baby due to your selfishness. The emotional blackmail was unbelievable. I looked at my work schedule. I had exactly enough sick days left to cover this insanity. I was panicking about the $85 copay, which was money I absolutely did not have after covering Kenneth's rent portion. But the thought of her actually going through with this fake medical process and blaming me if she lost the baby was too much for my anxious overthinker brain to handle. I called my best friend Maya 29F, who has zero filter. Girl, what the fuck? Maya yelled into the phone, her voice sounding muffled because she was clearly eating Chick-fil-A. She's 69, this is some dark comedy level manipulation. Do not go Nathan, just block her. I can't, Maya. She's threatening to blame me if she loses the baby, I whispered, glancing nervously at my coworkers. And she told them I have fertility issues. What if that goes on my permanent medical record? It won't, you idiot. You're letting her gaslight you into going to a fake appointment, Maya groaned. I know, but she is sitting there right now, probably in the lobby waiting. I have to go, Maya. I have to go and shut this down face to face, or she will show up at our apartment with Philip in the Panera bag and a tiny hat she knitted. Fine, Maya sighed, but you call me the second you walk out and record everything, every single absurd thing she says. So I left work. I had to pretend I was leaving early for a root canal. I grabbed my beat-up Toyota Corolla and drove across town to the Sterling building. The parking garage was impossible, and I ended up having to park in spot 47, 4 levels below the ground floor. My phone battery was at 3%. I was a mess. I took the elevator up to the 5th floor. I walked into the women's health clinic, which was bright, pristine, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and expensive hand soap. And there she was, Alice Bailey, 69F, sitting calmly on a sleek leather sofa, holding her phone like she was texting royalty. She spotted me instantly. Nathan, you came, she exclaimed, loud enough for the entire waiting room to hear. I knew you wouldn't abandon your family in their time of need. She stood up and walked toward me, putting her hand dramatically on her lower stomach. I'm feeling a little faint, darling, she whispered. Can you check me in? I walked up to the counter, ignoring the pitying look the receptionist gave me. Hi, I'm Nathan King. I'm here for my appointment and to check in Alice Bailey. The receptionist, a kind-looking woman with a headset, smiled professionally. She looked at her computer. Ah yes, Mr. King, we have your information here. Looks like Mrs. Bailey has listed you for the initial physical blood work and of course for the financial responsibility of today's $85 copy. I pulled out my credit card. I felt physically ill parting with that $85. And Mrs. Bailey, the receptionist continued, the doctor will see you shortly for your first trimester ultrasound. We are so excited for you. Alice beamed, accepting the praise like she was receiving an Oscar. Now, Mr. King, the receptionist said, her tone becoming slightly serious, just to confirm the reason for your visit. Mrs. Bailey mentioned you're here to discuss paternal stress and future planning and a general health check, correct? No, I said firmly, giving Alice a death glare. I am here because my mother-in-law is making an impossible medical claim and I need to stop her from using my name. Alice immediately grabbed my arm, digging her nails in. Oh, Nathan is such a joker. He's just so stressed about his career, doctor. He's always trying to find a reason to leave early, she said, back to the receptionist. The receptionist looked confused. She looked at me, then at Alice. Mr. King, if you're not here for the appointment as scheduled, we will have to reschedule you. I said, please cancel my appointment. And if you're not going to cover Mrs. Bailey's copy, the receptionist said, then she will also need to reschedule. But I already paid the $85, I said, pointing to the credit card slip I had just signed. Ah yes, the receptionist said, looking closer at the screen. You paid the $85 copay for your visit, Mr. King. Mrs. Bailey's first trimester ultrasound has a required copay of $145. She insisted you would cover both. I felt the rage I was holding back finally burst through the surface, the audacity. She demanded $85, knowing full well it was $145. I saw red. Alice, you are not pregnant, I said, my voice low and dangerous. And I am not paying another cent for this delusion. You are not a dependent on my plan, and I am not your son nor the father of whatever mythical being you think is inside you. The entire waiting room went silent. Alice's face crumbled instantly. The theatrics were starting. She started to sob, the full, wrenching sounds of utter devastation. How could you say that, Nathan? She wailed, clutching her chest. You are breaking my heart. You are stressing the baby. After all I've done for you, you're denying my medical necessity. Suddenly, a door opened. A nurse with a clipboard appeared. Alice Bailey, the nurse called out professionally. We're ready for you if you could come back now. And if the gentleman is coming for the ultrasound, he should join you. Alice looked at me, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were filled with triumph. She had me. If I walked away now, she would claim I abandoned her, and she would call Kenneth and Philip, and my life would be a permanent hell of passive-aggressive martyrdom. I looked at the nurse, then at the receptionist, then at Alice, who was waiting for me to break. I was physically shaking. I had spent $85 on a canceled physical. I was hours behind on work, and I was about to be dragged into a room to witness the biggest lie of my life. I am done, I whispered to myself, just done. I took a deep breath, I looked at Alice. I am not going in there with you, I said loud and clear. You are not pregnant, I am not committing insurance fraud, and I am walking away. Alice's face froze, the tears stopped immediately. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Try me. The nurse was waiting patiently, the receptionist was staring. I'm sorry, I said, addressing the staff, but Mrs. Bailey is having a mental health crisis, not a pregnancy. I paid the $85 for my own appointment, which you can keep. I am not paying $145 for a fake ultrasound, I'm going home. I turned, leaving Alice standing there, utterly bewildered that the guilt trip hadn't worked. I walked toward the elevator. I hit the down button furiously. I felt a surge of relief, but also overwhelming fear of the fallout. I was 2 steps into the elevator when I heard Alice scream, and it wasn't the fake theatrical cry. This was pure, unadulterated fury. You can't leave, you need to see this, she shrieked. The elevator doors were closing. I thought I was free. Then, just as the doors were about to seal shut, I saw Philip Jones, 68M, standing in the lobby entrance holding the Panera bag. He looked absolutely exhausted and defeated. He walked over to Alice, put his arm around her, and looked directly at the closing elevator doors where I stood. Philip didn't look angry, he just looked deeply, profoundly sad. Wait, Nathan, Philip yelled, startling everyone in the lobby. You don't understand, we need you here because the pregnancy is real. I pressed the door open button, heart hammering against my ribs. What are you talking about, Philip? She's 69. Philip took a shaky breath, looking at his wife, who was now smiling a strange, satisfied smile. It's not biologically hers, Nathan, Philip said, his voice cracking. It's a gestational surrogacy. She had an embryo implanted, and the doctor said the embryo is Kenneth's. My entire body went cold. Kenneth had told me he was donating sperm for cash a few months ago, but he swore he canceled the contract when I begged him to stop. I thought he needed $200 for business expenses. This wasn't a pyramid scheme. This was something else entirely. Philip looked at me defeated. And the only reason we need your insurance, Nathan, is because the clinic said if we couldn't pay for the care, they would stop the medical support. And if they stop the medical support, Alice interrupted, her voice sweet and terrible. Then the doctors will inform the court that since Kenneth never signed a legal contract with me, the surrogate will have to legally surrender the baby to the closest next of kin. And that's you, Nathan, unless you help us pay. We need you to come in and sign the financial responsibility forms, or you're getting full custody of your 22-year-old boyfriend's baby's surrogate sibling. I stood in the elevator, my jaw hanging open, looking at the man who compared me to his golden son and the woman who committed a very expensive medical stunt just to guilt me into being a better in-law. And now they were saying I was financially responsible for an infant. I couldn't move. I literally could not move. The elevator door slowly shut. I was trapped between floors, trying to process the fact that my obsessive mother-in-law had manufactured a medical time bomb and that I was about to become an unexpected parent. The phone battery died. I was left alone in the dark, silent elevator. I need to know what to do next. Do I walk away entirely, or do I go back and sign the papers to prevent a baby from being put in my custody? My mind is reeling. I can hear the receptionist calling the elevator from the 5th floor. I'm literally panicking. Tell me I'm not crazy. I am literally typing this update on my work laptop, hiding in an unused supply closet because I cannot deal with the bright, judgmental lights of the open plan office right now. Some of you messaged asking if I'm okay. The answer is no. I am currently functioning on 3 hours of sleep, lukewarm coffee, and pure unadulterated fury. Okay, so I need to tell you what happened when the elevator doors closed. I was trapped, right? Phone dead, stomach doing that cold, sick flip, and my brain was running the simulation. You are now the legal guardian of your boyfriend's genetically related half-sibling, carried by a stranger, orchestrated by your psychotic mother-in-law. This is insane. This is like a Lifetime movie written by someone who had too much caffeine and a grudge against the nuclear family unit. The elevator was still silent. I could hear the receptionist calling down. Then I heard Philip's voice muffled right outside the doors. Nathan, open the door, son, please. I pressed the door open button again. Nothing happened. The panic was real now. I felt like I was hyperventilating, trying to suck in enough air. I started frantically hitting the button for the ground floor, then the 5th floor, then the alarm button. Nothing. The entire building infrastructure had decided to join Alice in her quest to ruin my life. Finally, after what felt like an hour but was probably 45 seconds, the doors clunked open back onto the 5th floor lobby. The scene was exactly where I left it. Alice was standing there, beaming with that terrifying, satisfied smile, looking like a demonic Mary Poppins in her caftan. Philip looked physically deflated, clutching the Panera bag, which NGL I briefly considered grabbing because I hadn't eaten since yesterday. The nurse and receptionist were staring, wide-eyed, clearly wishing they had chosen a career path involving less high-stakes family drama. Ah, Nathan, perfect timing, Alice chirped. Now we can all go in and establish care. I stepped out of the elevator. My legs were shaking so badly I thought I might collapse right there on the pristine marble floor. I looked directly at Philip. You have to tell me you're lying. You cannot be telling me that Alice paid for gestational surrogacy just because Kenneth and I didn't get pregnant on her timeline. Philip shifted his weight. He looked at Alice and I saw a flash of fear in his eyes. It's true, Nathan, Philip mumbled. It wasn't cheap, we refinanced the boat. I wanted to scream, but the anxiety had curdled into a cold, hard determination. Kenneth donated sperm. He told me he was doing it for cash like he does with everything else, I said, my voice dangerously even. He told me he canceled the contract months ago. Alice laughed, a dry, grating sound. Oh, Kenneth is so naive, Nathan. He signed a very specific contract, drafted by a very good, very expensive lawyer that Philip found. She gave Philip a sharp look. A contract that stated if the recipient couple decided to terminate the arrangement, the biological material would revert to the next willing relative. Wait, you mean he didn't even donate to you directly? I asked, utterly bewildered. Of course not, Alice scoffed. Do you know how expensive that would have been? No, Kenneth donated to a program for crypto lifestyle cash, his words, and when the original couple pulled out, we jumped in. It was a bargain, Nathan. The embryo was already created, it just needed a host. My mind snagged on the most horrifying detail. Who is the host? Who is the surrogate, Alice? Alice just shrugged, fluttering her hand dismissively. Oh, some woman, probably very nice. The clinic handles all that anonymity, thankfully. But the paperwork needs to be signed today, Nathan. The surrogate requires advanced prenatal care and they won't continue until the financial guarantor is established. She lowered her voice, dripping with sincerity. We tried to use Philip's insurance, but they denied it. Something about non-traditional fertilization methods and elderly dependent claims. They were so rude, Nathan. But your plan, your gold-plated tech benefits. They cover surrogacy costs completely, especially if it's listed under family planning and necessary medical intervention. This was full-blown, intentional, criminal-level insurance fraud now. Not just lying about a pregnancy, but leveraging a real, expensive, high-risk medical situation to extort me. And if I don't sign the financial guarantor form, I asked, testing the boundary. Alice smiled, that sickly sweet grin. Then the clinic will petition the court to halt the treatment. And as the biological parent's cohabiting partner, since Kenneth is too busy with his networking, you, Nathan, become the closest next of kin responsible for the child once it's born. I looked at Philip again. He was avoiding Alice's gaze, staring at the floor, totally defeated. He was the one who usually compared me to Brandon, but right now he looked like he was about to burst into tears. Is that true, Philip? I asked. Is she threatening me with custody of a baby just to get my insurance? Philip took a deep, shuddering breath. She spoke to the lawyer, Nathan. Alice is very thorough. It's not exactly a strong case, but the lawyer said the threat of a legal battle over an abandoned embryo is usually enough to pressure people into paying the bills. And GL, that was the moment I stopped being the anxious overthinker and started being the pissed off overthinker. They weren't just crazy, they were weaponizing the legal system against me. I looked Alice dead in the eye. You are completely insane. I am calling the police. Alice didn't even flinch. Go ahead, Nathan. Tell the police that your elderly mother-in-law is trying to ensure her grandchild gets proper medical care. See who they side with. Besides, darling, you committed $85 worth of insurance fraud already by signing up for that stress physical. Don't make things worse. I realized I couldn't win this in the lobby. My heart was pounding, but my mind suddenly cleared. I had one goal: escape, find Maya, find a lawyer, and kill Kenneth. Fine, I said, putting my hands up slowly. You win the round, Alice, but I am not signing anything today. I need to consult with Kenneth. Kenneth is unavailable, Alice said quickly. He's at a very important business leadership seminar until Friday, but I told the nurse you would be responsible for the $145 ultrasound copay today just to ensure the surrogate gets her imaging. I looked at the nurse. I am absolutely not paying that. Then we will have to call Child Protective Services about potential medical neglect if the ultrasound is missed, Alice chirped. This was a total low blow. They were literally using the health of a developing fetus as a financial tool. I took out my wallet. I pulled out my physical debit card. My hands were shaking so hard I had to rest it on the counter. Fine, but this is the last cent you get from me, Alice, and I am contacting my company's legal department immediately. I paid the $145. I watched the receptionist key it in. The amount was small, but the implication was enormous. I just paid the entry fee into my own personalized hellscape. I turned back to Alice, who was already heading back with the nurse. Thank you, Nathan. You're such a good son-in-law. The baby will appreciate this. We'll call you later to discuss the prenatal vitamin budget. I walked out of that building in a daze. I didn't go to my car. I walked straight to a CVS, bought a cheap phone charger, and sat on a bench outside, charging my phone just enough to call Maya. The second my phone hit 5%, Maya's contact popped up. I answered, skipping the pleasantries. Maya, listen to me. Alice is not pregnant. She's using a surrogate. And Kenneth is the biological father, and they are threatening me with legal custody if I don't pay their medical bills. There was silence on the other end. Then Maya whispered, holy shit, Nathan. Thought you were just being dramatic. I spent the next hour walking Maya through the entire terrifying, absurd scenario. She was alternately screaming with outrage and laughing hysterically at the sheer scope of Alice's delusion. Okay, look, Maya said firmly. You need two things: a lawyer who specializes in family law surrogacy, and you need to get the hell out of that apartment and away from Kenneth. Today, he lied to you about something massive. This isn't a pyramid scheme, this is a life. Maya was right. Kenneth, the little liar who used my rent money for fake networking events, was actively manufacturing a new human life to fulfill his mother's obsession, and then lied about canceling the donation. I went home. It was 6:00 p.m. The apartment was silent. I checked the shared checking account. The $347 he needed for the marketing subscription was now gone, but that wasn't the biggest discovery. I opened our shared Google Drive where we kept digital copies of important documents. I found a file named BizOps. I opened it. It wasn't about his essential oil scam. It was a scanned copy of a contract, a confidentiality agreement between Kenneth Jenkins and the fertility clinic. It wasn't a donation agreement. It was a sale agreement. He had sold his genetic material for $5,000 payable in installments. And the fine print specifically detailed that if the intended parents backed out, which they did, the material could be released to any immediate traceable family member who covered the remaining contractual obligations. Kenneth hadn't lied about donating. He lied about why, and he lied about canceling. He didn't cancel because his mom swooped in and convinced him to let her take over the contract, knowing she could then leverage my insurance. Kenneth was complicit or at the very least criminally negligent. I was shaking again, but this time it was different. It was the adrenaline of knowing exactly what I was facing. It wasn't just a controlling mill, it was a partner who had actively endangered my future for $5,000 and his mother's approval. I looked around the apartment. The mismatched IKEA plates were on the drying rack. His slightly stained t-shirt was tossed over the chair. This wasn't home anymore. This was a crime scene. So 2 days later, Friday, 7:00 p.m., Kenneth finally came home from his leadership seminar. He walked in looking tired, clutching a duffel bag, smelling faintly of stale beer and desperation. "Babe, I'm back," he yelled, attempting his usual cheerful greeting. "My phone died, I missed you." I was sitting on the IKEA couch dead center with my laptop open. On the screen were 3 things: the fertility clinic contract, the Zelle withdrawal history, and the lawyer's intake form I had filled out that morning. "Don't call me babe," I said, my voice flat. Kenneth immediately sensed the shift. His face went pale. He dropped the duffel bag. "What's wrong? Is it work stress again? I told you to relax." "I went to the clinic on Tuesday, Kenneth," I stated. "I paid your mother's copy. I found out about the surrogate, and I found this." I gestured to the contract on the screen. He didn't even try to deny it. He just sagged onto the kitchen chair. "Look, Nathan, I was going to tell you," he mumbled, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. "It's complicated, okay? Mom and Dad were really pressuring me about the grandchild thing, and I needed the money, like desperately. My upline was threatening to deactivate my account if I didn't hit the buy-in quota. So you used your own genetic material to fulfill your mother's obsessive fantasies, lied to me, and put me at risk of financial and legal ruin, all for a pyramid scheme buy-in?" I asked, completely incredulous. "It wasn't like that. It was a good investment. And Mom said she had it handled with the insurance. She swore she was just using my dad's old plan. She said you wouldn't even notice." Kenneth whined. He truly believed he was the victim here. "You knew she was going to use me as the financial guarantor, didn't you?" He avoided my eyes. "Well, she said you had the better coverage. She said it was temporary." "Kenneth, I could lose my job for insurance fraud," I said, standing up. "And she is actively threatening me with custody of a baby, your baby, if I don't pay their bills." "She's bluffing," he insisted, finally looking up, but he couldn't maintain eye contact. "She's just trying to scare you into being supportive." "She's not bluffing, Kenneth. She refinanced the boat. She's committed to this." I threw my hands up in exasperation. "And let me ask you, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me walk into that clinic, pay that money, and endure that mental torture?" He shrugged weakly. "I was stressed, man. I was trying to close a big deal. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away." That was Kenneth's entire life philosophy. Ignore the immediate problem and maybe it will vaporize or Nathan will fix it. "I am done," I stated. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a yell. It was the quiet, absolute finality of someone who has reached the terminal limit of their patience. "Done with what?" he asked, trying to sound confused and innocent. "Done with you," I replied. "Done with the lies, done with the schemes, done with your parents, done with the passive-aggressive martyrdom, and done with being financially responsible for your life choices." I pointed to the 2 suitcases standing by the door. I had packed them with all of his clothes while he was gone. I called our landlord. "I'm paying the penalty fee to break the lease early. I found a subletter for my portion starting next month. You have 48 hours to be completely out of this apartment or I'm changing the locks and having your stuff put into storage." He stared at the suitcases, then at me, his face crumpled. "You're serious, Nathan? Come on, where am I supposed to go? Derek can't host me for more than a night." "We love each other. Love doesn't pay the rent, Kenneth," I snapped. "And love certainly doesn't involve manufacturing an infant to blackmail your partner into committing fraud." The gaslighting started again. "You're overreacting. This is exactly why you're always stressed. You turn everything into a crisis. Mom was right. You're too high-strung to be a father anyway." That hit me hard, but I held my ground. "Alice is a control freak with a serious mental health issue. You are a 22-year-old perpetual teenager who needs to grow up and get a real job. Get out." He tried to play the victim card, the emotional manipulation that always worked on my anxious brain. He came toward me, reaching for my hands. "Don't do this, Nathan. We had plans, the house in Tahoe. We were going to get matching Teslas." I took a giant step back. "Those were never our plans, Kenneth. Those were your dream board fantasies funded by my emergency savings. The only plan we have left is that you are moving out." I went into the spare bedroom and locked the door. I didn't unlock it until I heard the front door slam an hour later. He left a pathetic scribbled note saying, "I'll be back when your overreacting is done. I love you." I didn't sleep that night. I spent it screenshooting every text, contract detail, and bank transfer, prepping for the lawyer I had booked for Monday morning. Fast forward to Monday morning. The lawyer, whose name was Alina, was thankfully very no-nonsense. I sat there, exhausted, rambling about the Panera bag, the IKEA plates, the 7-year age gap, and the fake pregnancy. She listened to the whole saga without judgment, just occasionally raising an eyebrow. "Okay, Mr. King," Alina said, tapping a pen against the printed contract. "Here is the good news. Mrs. Bailey's claim about immediate custody reverting to you is likely hyperbolic and based on a worst-case reading of abandoned embryo law. You are not legally married to Kenneth, and you have no signed financial or paternal responsibility forms for the gestational carrier contract." I felt a monumental wave of relief wash over me. "So I can just walk away?" "Yes. But you need to make that boundary absolutely clear in writing to the clinic and to the Baileys Joneses," Alina warned. "They need to understand you are severing all financial and emotional ties to the situation immediately." The bad news was that the $230 I had paid at the clinic lost. The $1,247 rent money I covered for Kenneth, small claims court territory, which Alina advised me was likely not worth the mental toll. The insurance fraud accusation, since I canceled the stress physical and only paid the copay for their ultrasound, I was mostly in the clear, but I needed to report the incident to my company's HR and legal team just to protect myself. And GL, that call felt terrifying, like I was confessing to a crime I didn't commit. The rest of the week was a blur of logistics. I contacted the landlord, secured the subletter, and changed the utilities. I blocked Kenneth on everything except text because the lawyer advised me to keep a clean record of all contact. Alice, meanwhile, went nuclear. Text messages from Alice Tuesday. Alice 11:04 a.m. Nathan, I saw your email to the clinic. You are ripping the life out of my grandchild. You are selfish and cruel. Alice 11:05 a.m. The surrogate requires an injection today. If you do not pay the $290 for the medication, the baby will suffer. Alice 11:06 a.m. Kenneth is distraught. He is staying at Philip's office and crying constantly. You are ruining his life. Me 11:15 a.m. Alice, as advised by legal counsel, I am severing all connection and financial responsibility to you, Philip, Kenneth, and the gestational carrier agreement. I will not be paying any further medical bills. Any attempt to use my name, insurance, or credit will be reported immediately as fraud. Alice 11:17 a.m. You have chosen money over family. I will be sure to remind the baby when they are old enough about your abandonment. Then Philip started texting me, and this is where things got weird. Text messages from Philip Wednesday. Philip 9:30 a.m. Nathan, I saw Alice's text. Don't pay the $290. The injection is saline solution. Me 9:35 a.m. Philip, what are you talking about? Philip 9:37 a.m. The clinic is real, the surrogate is real, Kenneth's embryo is real. But Alice has been supplementing the real medical bills with entirely fake inflated invoices demanding cash that she says the insurance won't cover. She's been collecting cash from me too. The $290 is for a luxury prenatal massage she booked for herself, not an injection. Me 9:40 a.m. You know she's lying about the invoices. Philip 9:42 a.m. I found the real paperwork in the Panera bag. I've been trying to keep quiet to manage her stress, but this is too much. She's obsessed, Nathan. She talks about the baby constantly. She bought a crib, she bought tiny shoes, she has a problem. Philip 9:43 a.m. I am calling the clinic today to stop the payments from my side. I cannot let her do this anymore. I am done comparing Kenneth to Brandon. I'm done letting her use me. I just need to figure out how to live without her yelling at me all the time. This was the significant character development I didn't see coming. Philip, the parent who compares, finally cracked under the pressure of his wife's manufactured obsession. He wasn't the enemy, he was a fellow victim who finally reached his breaking point. It was a massive victory for my sanity to know I wasn't fighting two people, but one extremely obsessed woman and her two terrified hostages, Kenneth and Philip. 3 days after that, Saturday, I spent all day moving my essentials into a temporary Airbnb I booked, expensive but necessary for my mental health. Maya helped me load boxes. While we were lugging my mattress down the stairs, Kenneth showed up. He was wearing the same slightly stained t-shirt and looked terrible. Nathan, we need to talk, he shouted, blocking the stairwell. We are talking through lawyers now, Kenneth, I replied, not breaking stride. No, Mom is really mad now. She sent me here to get my PS5 and my favorite blanket, he whined, looking like a lost little boy. The PS5 is in storage with the rest of your unnecessary items, I said, trying to push past him. And you have 48 hours left to deal with your own problems. He grabbed my arm. Look, I love you, let's just talk about this. I'll get a real job, I'll stop selling essential oils, I'll go back to school, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't leave me, Nathan. I can't afford rent by myself, I'll be homeless. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't feel anxiety or anger. I just felt profoundly sad for the naive, irresponsible person he was. He wasn't asking me to stay because he loved me, he was asking me to stay because he needed a financial safety net. You should have thought about that before you put me at legal risk for your mother's obsession, Kenneth, I said, pulling my arm away. You chose the easy money and the path of least resistance. Now you deal with the consequences. He stood there, stunned. Maya, who had been listening with absolute fury, stepped forward. The time for talking is over, Kenneth, Maya said, her voice sharp. Move out of the way before I call the building security. He scurried away, grabbing his duffel bag and muttering about how unfair I was being. I later found out he went to stay at his dad's office because Philip wasn't letting him stay in the house until he got a job. Brandon, the golden son, apparently called Kenneth an idiot for using his semen as collateral. Good for Brandon, honestly. A week went by where I was entirely paranoid. I was expecting process servers, random visits from Alice, or maybe the actual gestational carrier showing up at my office. Nothing happened. The silence was deafening. I was living in the Airbnb, feeling strangely liberated but also deeply isolated. My boss called to check in about the root canal. I told him I had a significant personal crisis, and I finally came clean to HR about the insurance situation, just providing the dates and the fact that I had severed ties, leaving out the most insane details like the Panera bag. They told me to simply monitor my insurance portal for any suspicious charges. I kept texting Philip small check-ins. His responses were short but clear. Philip, Friday, Alice is still talking to the crib. I filed for separation yesterday, it's time. I felt genuinely bad for Philip. He had been so complicit in the guilt-tripping and the comparing, but ultimately he broke free from the psychological prison Alice had built. By Tuesday, I was ready to face the music. I had to go back to the old apartment to finalize the lease handover. I arrived at 3B, the door was unlocked. Kenneth wasn't there, but Alice was. She was sitting on the floor in the living room surrounded by boxes of her own belongings. The mismatched IKEA plates, a very small, expensive-looking white crib, a stack of tiny knitted hats, and the dreaded Panera bag which now looked like a religious artifact. "Nathan," she said, her voice hollow. She didn't stand up. She looked truly defeated this time. "Alice, what are you doing here?" "I am packing up my contributions to this relationship," she said, gesturing vaguely at the plates. "Philip is trying to divorce me. Kenneth is sleeping on a folding cot in his father's dusty real estate office. And the clinic called me this morning." My stomach clenched. "What did the clinic say?" Alice sniffed dramatically. "They said that since neither Philip nor I have established legal guardianship or paid the outstanding balance, and since Kenneth is an irresponsible 22-year-old, they have terminated the agreement and are working with a legal team to find new intended parents for the embryo." I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. The medical time bomb was diffused. The custody threat was gone. "So the baby is safe," I confirmed. "It will be raised by strangers," Alice wailed, finally letting out a torrent of real tears. "Strangers who won't appreciate me, strangers who won't understand the sacrifice." I looked at her, sitting there amidst her delusions, surrounded by the physical manifestation of her obsession. She was truly sad, not just performing. "Alice," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "You need help, not a baby. You need professional psychological help." She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. "I only wanted a grandchild, Nathan. Why couldn't you and Kenneth just do what was expected?" "Because we are adults who make our own choices, Alice," I said, setting the final boundary. "And my choice now is to walk away from all of this. I wish you well, but I will not be speaking to you or Kenneth again." I picked up the last of my boxes, the ones Maya hadn't got. I took one final look at the apartment I thought was home, realizing I had just walked away from a potentially life-altering situation. The resolution, such as it is, it's been 6 weeks now. I'm typing this from my new apartment, which is basically a shoebox, but it's mine. The rent is tight, but I'm sleeping soundly for the first time in years. I officially broke the lease and paid the penalty. I changed my address, my locks, and all my passwords. My old apartment is happily occupied by a very nice, drama-free grad student. Kenneth tried to text me 47 times in the first 2 weeks, mostly asking for money and telling me how much his dad's office smelled like stale coffee. I blocked him permanently. I haven't heard anything from him since, but Maya saw his latest Instagram story. He's apparently back to crypto lifestyle coaching, now using his personal apartment. I assume he crashed with Derek as the backdrop for his motivational videos. He's already dating someone new, NGL, which is exactly the emotional maturity I expected. Alice is apparently still fighting the separation from Philip. Philip, to his credit, has stuck to his guns. He texted me last week saying, "I sold the boat, used the money for a therapist and a new apartment. Thanks for the wake-up call, Nathan." It was the closest he came to an apology, and TBH, it was enough. The biggest lesson? Sometimes walking away is the only solution, even when the person trying to rope you in is using something as heavy and manipulative as a baby. I spent $230 on copies and $1,500 on the lease break penalty, and I reported the whole fraud attempt to my corporate legal team. They just logged the incident and told me not to worry unless I saw charges. It felt expensive, but I view it as the tuition fee for my PhD in how to spot a toxic pyramid scheme. I am still an anxious overthinker, obviously. I still check my insurance portal every morning. But now when I overthink, it's about rational things, like whether I should buy the jumbo pack of toilet paper at Costco, not whether I'm about to become the involuntary parent of my ex-boyfriend's surrogate sibling. Yesterday I bought myself a new set of dinner plates at Target. They match perfectly. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my tiny new couch, and binge-watched Netflix guilt-free. I realized that my PTO hours are mine and I can use them to volunteer or to watch Hulu, and neither choice makes me less of a person. I finally feel free. I lost a partner, but I regained my future. The panic is gone, replaced by a quiet, determined calm. I am okay. I will be okay. We'll update if Alice somehow manages to put a lien on my new Target plates. Highly doubt it, though. Thanks for listening, Reddit. You guys kept me sane through the entire insane ride.